Hello everyone, welcome to session 12 of IS Baba's rapid revision series of 500 high probable topics for prelims 2020. I'm Preetham Reddy and I will be dealing with 15 important topics which are very crucial for prelims examination this year in each session. So today's first topic is National Human Rights Commission. Okay, so this particular National Human Rights Commission is important this year, especially with respect to its composition, because recently there was amendments done to the Protection of Human Right Amendment Act. Okay, so there was amendment done to this Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. So let's know some basics. So National Human Rights Commission, so you might be knowing it is a statutory body and it is not a constitutional body. And you have to remember that this National Human Rights Commission, it was established in 1993 under a legislation which was enacted by the Parliament, that is Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. So NHRC is enacted under this Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. So let's see the composition which was given earlier. Okay, so earlier this National Human Rights Commission, it is a multi-member body still, but earlier it used to consist of a chairman and 4 members. Okay, so the full-time members was 1 chairman and 4 members. Okay, so it is important to remember that this chairman should be a retired Chief Justice of India. So he was a retired Chief Justice of India. And now out of these 4, 2 members had to be from judicial background. That is, one can be a serving or retired Supreme Court judge, and one should be a serving or retired CJ of High Court, that is Chief Justice of High Court. Okay, and 2 persons who are having knowledge or practical experience with respect to human rights. So I'll write who are from human rights field. Okay, so this was the composition earlier, and in addition to these full-time members, there was also 4 ex officio members under this National Human Rights Commission. Okay, and these 4 ex officio members were the chairman of National Commission for SCs, National Commission for STs, okay, National Commission for Minorities, and National Commission for Women. Okay, so these 4 ex officio members, that is chairman of all these commissions, were 4 ex officio members of this National Human Rights Commission. So next important fact what we have to remember is, so the chairman and full-time members are appointed by the president on the recommendation of a 6-member committee, and this 6 members included Prime Minister as the chairperson, Home Minister, Leader of Opposition of both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, so both the houses, Leader of Opposition, Speaker of the Lok Sabha and Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. So you have to remember this particular setup. Okay, so now we will see what were the amendments done to this Protection of Human Rights Act. So there was this amendment which was passed in 2019. So we'll see what are the differences. As I said earlier, that composition, like 1 person is chairman who should have been a retired CJI, right? So NHRC chairperson was a person who has been a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Now it has been amended. Now a person who has been Chief Justice of Supreme Court or a judge of Supreme Court will be the chairperson of the NHRC. So they have added even retired judge of Supreme Court now can be a chairperson of the NHRC. Okay, next important thing is I talked about this 2 persons who are from the field of human rights, right, who have knowledge and practical experience with respect to human rights. So earlier there were 2 members, now they have been added like 1 more person, so now it is 3 members, and at least 1 member should be a woman. Okay, and next important thing is earlier I said there were 4 ex officio members, and they were chairpersons of various commissions such as National Commission for Minorities, SCs, STs, Women. Okay, National Commission for Minorities. Now it includes chairpersons of National Commission for Backward Classes, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, and Chief Commissioner for Person with Disabilities. Okay, so now they have expanded this ex officio members, and now it includes chairpersons of backward classes National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, Commissioner for persons with disabilities. Okay, and you have to remember one more important thing. Earlier the term of office was fixed to 5 years or till the age of 70 years, whichever is earlier. Okay, so earlier the act stated that the chairperson and the members of the NHRC or SHRC, they will hold office for 5 years. So both the members or the chairperson, they will hold office for 5 years or till the age of 70 years, whichever is earlier. However, now the amendment has reduced the term of office to 3 years or till the age of 70 years, whichever is earlier. So you have to remember this. See, UPSC is more interested with something which has been recently updated or changes, so we can expect a question, so be careful. Okay, and next important amendment is regarding the Secretary General. So the act provides for a Secretary General of the NHRC and also Secretary for the state HRC. Okay, and these people, they exercise powers as may be delegated to them. Okay, so the Secretary General and Secretary of State HSRC, like, who exercise powers as may be designated to them. However, now the amendment allows the Secretary General and Secretary to exercise all administrative and financial powers except judicial functions, and one important thing is they are subjected to the respective chairperson's control. So now they are giving control to the chairperson. Okay, and sixth important point is the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. It sought establishment of Human Rights Commission in both states and UTs. Okay, now amendment provided that the central government, it may confer on some SHRC, that is State Human Rights Commission, like human rights functions being discharged by UTs. So any UTs human right functions, state government can confer upon some state HRC. But one important thing is functions relating to human rights in the case of Delhi. So for Delhi, the human rights matters will be dealt with NHRC only. Okay, so these are the some of the important amendments. So next important amendment is Right to Information Amendment Act 2019. Okay, so amendment was done to Right to Information Act 2005. See, two major amendments you have to remember regarding Right to Information Act 2019. One is the term of office of the Chief Information Commissioner, and State Chief Information Commissioner will be prescribed by the central government. That is, term of office will be prescribed by the central government, and also salaries and allowances along with their terms and conditions of service, they will be also prescribed by the central government. So central government is taking all the powers. Okay, so we'll see what are the amendments done. So section 13 subclause 1 to this RTI Act. Okay, so initially the Chief Information Commissioner, he could hold office for a term of 5 years. Okay, so initially the RTI Act 2005 provided that CIC shall hold office for a term of 5 years from the date on which he enters upon his office, and he shall not be eligible for reappointment. However, the amendment now says that the Chief Information Commissioner shall hold office for such term as may be prescribed by the central government. So you have to remember, now the term is prescribed by the central government and he is not eligible for reappointment. And section 16 subclause 1, so it deals with the state Chief Information Commissioner. Okay, so again this is also now it is fixed or prescribed by the central government. So no changes. Earlier it was 5 years, now here it is prescribed by the central government. So next important amendment is related to the information commissioners. So every information commissioners earlier under RTI Act 2005 shall hold office for the term of 5 years. Okay, from the date on which he enters upon his office or till he attains the age of 65 years, and whichever is earlier, and shall not be eligible for reappointment. So this is what was provided before, but now every information commissioner shall hold office for such a term as may be prescribed by the central government or till he attains the age of 65 years, whichever is earlier. Okay, so again the term is prescribed by the central government. So just remember, all the amendments are dealing with central government. Okay, so again here change it to the information commissioners. Okay, so 16 subclause 2 deals with the state information commissioners. So earlier it provided for the term of 5 years, now again it is prescribed by the central government. And also salaries and allowances, terms and conditions, services of chief information commissioner, earlier it provided that it will be same as the chief election commissioner. However, now the salaries and allowances payable to and other terms and conditions of services of this chief information commissioner and also the information commissioners shall be prescribed by the central government. Okay, so next important topic is new RTI rules. Okay, so according to this RTI Amendment Act 2019, so new rules, RTI rules have been prescribed by the central government. So RTI term of office, salaries, allowances and other terms of condition of chief information commissioner, state information commissioner rules. Okay, now according to this particular RTI rules, the rules have reduced the tenure of information commissioner from 5 years to 3 years. Okay, you have to remember the tenure of information commissioners have been reduced from 5 years to 3 years, and the chief information commissioner's salary has been now fixed to 2.5 lakh, whereas information commissioner's salary is fixed to 2.25 lakhs. Okay, and one more important thing is this particular new RTI rules, it gives the government the discretion to decide on the conditions of service. Okay, now the second point is very important because earlier it had provided that information commissioner is eligible for appointment as chief information commissioner but cannot hold office for more than a total of 5 years. So they said information commissioners can be eligible for appointment as CIC. However, he cannot hold office for more than total of 5 years, including his term as information commissioner. So this is very important. Okay, and now the new RTI rules is reducing this 5 years to 3 years, and I'm not sure how this information commissioners can become CIC because they have very less tenure. Anyway, so now the new rules, maybe it will be chief information commissioner will be eligible for appointment until and unless he holds the office for more than but he cannot hold the office more than 3 years. Okay, and next important point is regarding the salary of state chief information commissioner and state information commissioners. Now the new rules has set it to 2.25 lakhs to the both, that is it is the same. Okay, so both state chief information commissioners and state information commissioners, they draw 2.25 lakhs. Okay, and also it is important to remember some of the small news articles which dealt with that government funded NGOs come under the RTI ambit, and Chief Justice of India is considered as a public authority, and even they come under the RTI Act. And recently I think Supreme Court had held that CBI is exempt from the RTI. Okay, so keep track of such news. Okay, it can be important. Next important topic is private members bill. Okay, so a bill, when it is introduced by a legislator who is not part of executive, okay, that is a bill which is piloted by non-minister MPs. Okay, so MPs who are not ministers, non-minister MPs, or who is not part of the executive, such bills are called as private member bill. And it is important to note that only 14 private bills have been passed by both the house and it has become the law. So I have given the list here. Okay, and the last such bill which was which became the law was the Supreme Court Enlargement Criminal Appellate Jurisdiction Bill during 1970. Okay, so it was in the 1970 last such bill, that is private member bill, which actually became the law. Okay, so we will try to understand regarding the private member bill and the procedure for introduction or introducing this private member bill in the parliament. Okay, see, the admissibility of a private member bill is decided by the presiding officer of that respective house. So in Rajya Sabha it is the chairman, and in case of Lok Sabha it is the speaker. So the admissibility of this private member bill is decided by the Rajya Sabha chairman or speaker of the Lok Sabha. Okay, and we will see the procedure. So the member must give at least a month's notice before the bill can be listed for introduction. Okay, so the member should give at least a month's notice before the bill can be listed for introduction, and House Secretariat he examines this particular bill for compliance with the constitutional provisions and also rules on legislations before listing it. Okay, so House Secretariat will examine it, and there is one important fact, like up to 1997 these private members could introduce up to 3 bills in a week. Okay, however this led to piling up of lot of bills that were introduced but never discussed. So therefore later on the number of private member bills, it was capped to 3 per session. Okay, and next important fact is government bills can be introduced and discussed on any day. Okay, so while government bills can be introduced and discussed on any day, private member bills can be discussed on only one day. Okay, so it can be introduced and discussed only on Fridays. So this is important. And next important thing is, like when the bill is put to vote and if the private member gets the support of the house, then the bill gets passed. Okay, so next important topic is CBI appointment process. Okay, so there were recent editorials and articles which dealt with the CBI's appointment process as arbitrary. Okay, see, initially CBI draw its legality from this 1946 Delhi Delhi Special Police Establishment Act. So you might be knowing, you might have read in Lakshmikant also. So CBI drew its legality from the 1946 Delhi Special Police Establishment Act. Okay, and before the Lokpal Act was legislated, CBI directors were appointed by this DSP Act. Okay, so remember, before Lokpal Act was legislated, CBI director were appointed by the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act. However, after Lokpal Act legislated, so now the Lokpal Act governs the appointment of the CBI director. So this is important point. Lokpal Act governs the appointment of the CBI director. Okay, and center appoints the CBI director on the basis of recommendation of a search committee, and those search committees comprises of PM, CJI and leader of opposition. So try to remember this small fact. Okay, and it can be important. Okay, so many people wouldn't have followed this particular news. Okay, next important topic is regarding the post retirement jobs of the for judges. Okay, so you might be knowing that CGI Gogai, right? So he joined Rajya Sabha. Okay, so that time there were a lot of editorials dealing with the post retirement jobs for judges, whether judges should be getting jobs post their retirement. Okay, because they might influence some judgments to help or in favor of the government, so that they can get some post retirement jobs. Okay, so let's see regarding this particular post retirement jobs for judges. Okay, so constitution does not bar judges from taking up any post retirement assignment. Okay, so you have to remember, constitution does not specifically bar judges from taking up any post retirement assignment, and most of the post retirement posts are generally constitutional or of quasi judicial bodies. Okay, so most of the post retirement posts are generally constitutional and quasi judicial bodies, right? We saw like NHRC, right, or SHRC. So there and all we need, or some tribunals. Okay, so there and all we need the retired judges. Okay, so most of the post retirement posts are generally constitutional or quasi judicial bodies, and whose laws more often than not mandate that only retired judges can occupy them. Okay, and also it is important to note statutes of some tribunals and quasi judicial bodies, they mandate that only retired judges can occupy them. Okay, and it is important to note that CAG and UPSC chairman, they are ineligible for further employment either under the government of India or the government of a state. Okay, so there were criticism, and many suggested that like CAG and UPSC chairman, like judges should be ineligible for further employment either under the government of India or under the government of a state. Okay, so next important topic is Pattachitra. Okay, so regarding Pattachitra, there was a lot of news because the recent cyclone, I think Fani and even Amphan. Okay, but during the Fani and all, like a lot of artists, Pattachitra artists, they got, and even due to the lockdown. Okay, so most of the Pattachitra artists, like they were impacted. Okay, So let's know about this Pattachitra. So Pattachitra is a general term for traditional and cloth-based scroll painting. Okay, and these paintings are based in the eastern Indian states of Odisha and West Bengal. So you have to remember Odisha and West Bengal. And this Pattachitra art form is known for its intricate details as well as mythological narratives and folk tales which are inscribed on it. So very intricate details are there. Okay, and major themes, it centers around the Jagannath and Vaishnava sect. Okay, so most of the themes they surround the like Vaishnava and the Jagannath and Vaishnava sect. Okay, so the paintings of Odisha can be divided into three categories. So I have given here. So if it is painting on cloth, they are called Pattachitra, and if it is paintings on wall, it is called Bitti Chitra, and if it is on palm leaf, it is called like Talapatra Chitra. Okay, so you have to remember these things. And Pattachitras are a component of an ancient Bengali narrative art. Okay, originally serving as a visual device during the performance of a song. So usually earlier, like it was like in Bengali narrative art, they used to show this Pattachitra arts. Okay, and the theme of Odia painting we saw already, right? And Odisha already has three handicrafts that have earned GI tag, and even the Pattachitra has GI tag. Okay, so try to remember. So from Odisha, like stone carving of Konark, applique work of Pipli, okay, Pattachitra also. And recently, I think we dealt with some of the GI tags like Odisha Rasgulla, and I think even some Haldi turmeric was also in 2019 list. So next important topic is Madhubani painting. Okay, so Madhu means honey, Vani, that is one, or Ban means forest. Okay, so Madhubani literally means forest of honey. Okay, and it's a traditional Indian painting, and it belongs to Maithili region. Okay, so majorly the areas of Indo-Nepal border and across Bihar. Okay, and this Madhubani paintings, it include both mythology and natural objects such as sun, moon, plants, etc. And usually these paintings are done by the women. Okay, and in Madhubani painting, a cotton wrapped around bamboo stick is used as a brush. Okay, so you have to remember lot of natural items are used. Okay, so for paint brushes, it is usually done by cotton wrapped around bamboo sticks, and even like for colors, okay, usually they are obtained in different ways. For example, for black color, they mix soot or cow dung. Okay, and for white color, they usually use mixture of rice powder. Okay, so it is done in a very natural way. Okay, and in Madhubani painting, the work is done on freshly plastered mud walls. Okay, and nowadays for commercial purpose, it is also done on cloth and paper also. And even Madhubani painting has got GI tag. So try to remember that. So next important topic is there was Global Basava Jayanti, which was celebrated on April 26th. Okay, so it is celebrated on April 26th, and it is to honor the birth of Vishwaguru Basaveshwara. Okay, so this guy is Basaveshwara. Okay, so he is called as Vishwaguru Basaveshwara. Okay, and let's know about this Basaveshwara. So he was born in Bijapur district. So there is a place called Bagewadi and Bijapur district in Karnataka, and during like 1131 AD. Okay, so he was from 12th century, and he is considered as a great philosopher and social reformer. Okay, who gave a unique spiritual path to mankind. Okay, and he is also known for his like founding saint of the Lingayat sect. Okay, so he is also called as founding saint of the Lingayat sect. Okay, and his spiritual discipline was based on the principle of Arivu. Arivu means knowledge, true knowledge, Achara, that is right conduct, and Anubhava, that is experience. So Arivu, Achara, and Anubhava, that is true knowledge, right conduct, and divine experience. And we have to know some important literacy works or some important things associated with Basava, like Vishwaguru Basveshwara. Okay, so famous works include Kalyana Rajya. Okay, So his practical approach and act of establishment of Kalyana Rajya. So Kalyana Rajya is like welfare state. Okay, so brought new status and position for all the citizens of the society. Okay, so he had given this uh, particular concept of Kalyana Rajya, and where irrespective of class, caste, creed, and sex, like all kind of citizens, their positions were good during his time. And also he established Anubhava Mantapa. So Anubhava Mantapa, it's like a first parliament concept of the world. Okay, so Anubhava Mantapa can be treated like a common forum for all to discuss the prevailing problems of socio-economic and political issues. Okay, so it was like a common forum, and it was the first and foremost socio-religious parliament of India. Okay, and also Basava Tattva is important. Okay, it is a never ending inspiration to achieve the welfare of mankind, and his teachings are time tested, and they are like scientific and proven. Okay, and during 2015, Prime Minister of India inaugurated the statue of Basava along the bank of River Thames at London. Okay, and also in 2017, PM unveiled translation of Basava's volumes called Vachana. Okay, so these Vachanas, which are like some Carnatic or Kannada literature, okay, they have important values and some important writings of like universal brotherhood, and which can be uh, kind of spread to the entire world. Okay, so next important topic is Adi Shankaracharya. Okay, so this Adi Shankaracharya is Hinduism's greatest thinker, you might be knowing, and he was from early 18th century Indian philosopher. Okay, so he was an early 8th century Indian philosopher, and he consolidated the doctrine of Advaita Vedanta. So know that he is associated with Advaita Vedanta, and he is also credited with unifying and establishing the main currents of thoughts in Hinduism. Okay, and his works in Sanskrit discuss the unity of Atman. Okay, so it discusses the unity of Atman and Nirguna Brahman, that is Brahman without attributes. Okay, that is Atman and Nirguna Brahman. And he also explained the key difference between Hinduism and Buddhism, stating that Hinduism asserts Atman, that is soul and self exists. So Hinduism asserts that soul exists or self exists, that is Atman exists, while as Buddhism asserts that there is no soul, no self. Okay, and also Adi Shankaracharya has been like very famous and reputed to have founded uh, a lot of matas, especially four important matas and monasteries, which actually helped in the historical development, revival, and spread of this Advaita Vedanta. Okay, of which he is known as the greatest revivalist. And on women, Adi Shankaracharya opens this beautiful hymn called Saundarya Lahari. So remember, Saundarya Lahari is a hymn which is provided by Adi Shankaracharya, and he describes Saundarya Lahari, that is the wave of beauty, or a set of slokas with a clear statement on how Lord Shiva is totally powerless without his wife Shakti. Okay, so he tells like how woman is powerful. Okay, so next important topic of the day is 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. So it is remembered, like it is important to know about Guru Nanak Dev Ji, right? So Guru Nanak, he was born in like 1469. So this marks 2019 marks 550th birth anniversary. Okay, so he was born in 1469. Okay, in Nankana Sahib, Pakistan. And Guru Nanak Dev Jayanti is observed to celebrate the birth of this Guru Nanak Dev, and who is considered as first of the 10 Sikh Gurus. Okay, and also the founder of Sikhism. Okay, so remember, and he also advocated Nirguna Bhakti, right? So Nirguna Bhakti means like devotion to and worship of formless divine. Okay, so devotion to and also devotion and worship of a formless divine. Okay, and he firmly rejected practices of sacrifices, ritual baths, idol worship, austerities, and scriptures of both Hindus and Muslims. Whereas he took the God as formless. So he took the God as formless, which has no gender, and proposed a simple way to connect to him by just remembering and repeating his name. Okay. And Guru Nanak ji, like he set up rules for congregational worship, sangat, okay, involving collecting recitation. Okay, so collective recitation, and he appointed Angad to succeed him as the Guru. And he never wished to establish new religion, but after his death, his followers consolidated his practices and distinguished themselves from both Hindus and Muslims by calling themselves Sikhs. Okay, that's why he is called as the founder of Sikhism. Okay, also fifth Guru Arjun Dev Ji, like he compiled Guru Nanak's hymns and other religious poets ka teaching also in Adi Granth Sahib. Okay, so try to remember about Guru Nanak Dev and revise. And next important topic is Kartarpur corridor. You would have read. So India and Pakistan, they both signed an agreement to operationalize this Kartarpur corridor, right? So founding stone for the 4-lane human corridor was laid out, okay, during November 2019, and the Gurudwara in Kartarpur stands on the bank of Ravi. Okay, so you can see here Ravi river. Okay, so this Gurudwara in Kartarpur, it stands on the bank of Ravi, about 120 km northeast of Lahore, and it was here that Guru Nanak assembled a Sikh community and lived for 18 years. Okay, until his death in 1539. So his death was like in 1539. So in Gurudwara in Kartarpur, right? So it is where like Guru Nanak assembled, and he lived there 18 years until his death. And the shrine is visible from the Indian side, and Sikhs usually gather in large numbers for darshan from the Indian side. Okay, and access to Gurudwaras in Pakistan, like Sikh, like they are getting now access to Gurudwara. Okay, and India had first proposed the Kartarpur Sahib corridor in 1999 when then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee took a bus ride to Lahore. Okay, so now the travel will be visa free. Pilgrims need just a valid passport. Okay, so try to remember about Kartarpur corridor also. Next important point is South Asian Nitrogen Hub. Okay, so 18 Indian institutions are part of this South Asian Nitrogen Hub, and major thing is to study, major focus is to study nitrogen pollution. So this South Asian Nitrogen Hub, it is a group of 50 research institutions from United Kingdom. Okay, so remember yesterday we dealt with one fund which was funded by the Germany, okay, to UNEP and IUCN, like that. This particular South Asian Nitrogen Hub, it is from UK. Okay, it is funded from UK, and the major focus is to study the quantum and impact of nitrogen pollution, especially in South Asia. Okay, and like South Asian Nitrogen Hub, try to remember 50 research institutions from United Kingdom as well as South Asia, and this South Asian Nitrogen Hub has secured 20 million pounds or about 200 crore rupees from UK government. Okay, so next important thing, like we will try to know about like you should try to know about little bit regarding the nitrogen. Okay, and what are the causes of nitrogen pollution. Okay, so next important topic is United Nations Population Fund. So recently there was a report, that is State of World Population 2020 report, and this report is published by United Nations Population Fund, and there are some few important facts to know about this United Nations Population Fund. Okay, so this United Nations Population Fund, it is a subsidiary organ of the United Nations General Assembly, and it works as a sexual and reproductive health agency. Okay, so it works as a sexual and reproductive agency. Okay, the UN Economic and Social Council, it establishes the mandate of this United Nations Population Fund, and United Nations Population Fund, it was established as a trust in 1967, and it began operations in 1969, and in 1987 it was officially renamed United Nations Population Fund, but the original abbreviation UNFPA, right? So initially it was called United Nations Fund for Population Activities, so it was retained. Okay, and the major important point, so I have put here, UNFPA like is not supported by UN budget. Okay, so it is not supported by UN budget, so this can be confusing. Okay, instead it is entirely supported by voluntary contributions of donor governments, intergovernmental organization, private sector, foundation and individuals. And this UNFPA works directly to tackle some sustainable goals such as SDG 3, health, education and gender equality. Okay, so these are the topics in this session. So we will try to meet with 15 like more important topics in the next session. Thank you. Do subscribe and do comment if you have any queries.